And we're live.
Well, hello, Boise. Thanks so much for joining us today for our first ever virtual listening session or virtual town hall. I'm Mayor McLean, and I'm sorry that I can't be with you in person, but really glad that we were able to have this opportunity and this technology to try out today as I answer questions from residents. I've got just a couple logistics things to do before we get started. Lana Graybeal is here. I think you can probably see her right now in her screen, and she'll be moderating questions. So as she gets them, she will say them to me. And I'm going to start with a couple questions that were submitted that Lana will ask me. And then after that, we'll go to live questions. And of course, we only have an hour, so we'll try to get through as many as we can. And if we aren't able to get to yours, there's a form you can fill out and somebody will get back with you. And then I also want to acknowledge and thank both Lavana and Karen, who are with us today to be sign language translators for this session. So welcome, everybody. And with that, I'll turn it over to Lana.
Thank you, Mayor. Just quickly, I want to reiterate that we will do our very best to get to everyone's questions. And some of the questions we received multiple emails about, and so we will group them into one for efficiency. As the Mayor stated, if yours does not get answered, please use the form. The online form, it'll be in the YouTube live chat as well, and we will get back to you as well. And then if you can, please state your name and which area of town you're in so that we can get back to you and reply to you with that information. And with that, thank you for joining, and we will start with the first question. And also, I'm going to turn off my camera, so then it's just the Mayor and the ASL interpreter, but you will continue to hear my voice.
Thanks, Lana.
So, Mayor, there's a question from the community member and a letter from Boise Renters United that is asking the city to cancel rent until a full month after social distancing restrictions are lifted, and also to enact a full moratorium on filing and executions of all evictions. And lastly, to provide safe, humane emergency housing for all people without homes to allow individuals to practice social distancing. Can you help answer that question?
Sure, thanks. And also I want Boise Renters United to know that you are going to get a response in writing from us as well. This last week, we've been dealing with a lot of different things, but we're working on that, and that'll be sent out to you soon. I want to start out with acknowledging that many of the same people asked us in the early days of this crisis to put an eviction moratorium in place. And to do that requires me to enact police powers. And I instead asked the governor to do that because he could, without enacting police powers, and was happy to see that while the governor didn't take action, the Supreme Court did stop filings, except for evictions related to drug use or drug manufacturing. And so right now, effectively, evictions have been paused. We have done a couple things at the city of Boise. First off, for properties that we oversee, manage, and own, we did forgive rent for both April and for May, and we committed not to evict our residents from properties that we own. We cash flowed that and made sure that it was possible to do because we wanted to do it. And at the same time, encouraged others to do it if they could, and recognize that not everybody, not all landowners and property owners can do that for their renters. This is a tough time where many of us are indeed experiencing economic hardship. I recognize that any decision that we make in this crisis is tough, because when you're making decisions to close things to protect life and public health, we know that we're impacting the economies of people. And for that, I'm sorry. We have made sure as a city that we are prepared and ready to offer housing to those who are unhoused, who need it. And we have worked with the shelters and with other service providers and have put together a team here at the city to be able in a minute to help move people to isolate and quarantine if they've been exposed or have the virus, so that people that are unhoused are not living in shelters with others who might be ill or having to stay unhoused on the streets when they're not well. Right now, we've been very lucky that the shelters have not had positive tests come back, but we're working with them daily and are committed to making sure that people have a place to stay a roof over their head during this health crisis. And then on prevention of evictions, we have set aside additional funds to support Catch in their working with people to connect them with the services they need. And we continue to partner with Jesse Tree to ensure that families have the support and resources they need to prevent being evicted. So you'll receive a reply to me from me shortly. And know that while we are not mandating that everybody stop charging rent, we are taking the actions that we can take responsibly with the impact that the economy has had on people in this community in mind, and the realities of what we can best do to meet the needs of our residents.
Thank you, Mayor. The next question we received several about these. So people are asking why golf courses are closed and basketball hoops taken down. Could you please address both?
Sure. We closed golf courses, tennis courts, basketball courts, as well as playgrounds during this crisis, because we know that it's important to prevent groups from getting together, and the virus lingers on surfaces. So when we made the decision first to close playgrounds, it was because of the high use that they were getting and the signs that told us that the virus would linger, and we couldn't guarantee that we could clean it as we should. There are also concerns about tennis courts and basketball courts for the same reasons. Balls moving, touching different people, large groups of people, heavy breathing, et cetera, in closer spaces, and touching, especially with tennis courts, touching of the gates and other things around the court. So to protect our residents, we close them, but also to protect our employees who would otherwise be servicing and cleaning those courts. And so we've repurposed those employees to do other things within the parks. We continue to, just one more thing, Lana, we will continue to monitor the status of the virus. We are so happy to see that the steps that we took seem to be working. The steps the governor took seem to be working. And there are fewer people asking for tests, fewer positive tests coming back. And we are now thinking about the steps that we take to reopen and how we do that and what that looks like.
Thank you. And just for the attendees, I want to remind you that you could also use the YouTube live chat to send in questions or submit questions that you have. We just have 2 more from the ones that were submitted over the weekend, and then we'll turn it over to the live questions. So Mayor Robert from Central Bench asked, how many city workers have you sent home, reduced their hours during this crisis? Since you shut down the city to non-essential work, it would seem to me that many city workers would have been furloughed or had their hours cut. Can you please tell me how much you reduced the city payroll during this crisis?
Sure. What we did was early in this crisis, we put together a plan for how we could get most of our employees working remotely. We classified how we would provide essential services, such as licensing of daycare providers and making sure that public safety folks are out keeping our neighborhoods safe. And then we determined what of those essential services we could actually deliver remotely, like planning and development services and the applications they take, et cetera. Anyone that has been sent home and is not working from home has likely been in their original job, has likely been repurposed and meeting other needs. We wanted to make sure that we took care of our employees, so we created pandemic leave so that if they got ill or they had family members who were ill, they could take time off to take care of them or to take care of themselves. If they've been exposed to the virus, like every other employer in this community, we're asking them to self-isolate. And then we've looked at positions and current needs that are different than we had several months ago, and have asked employees such as librarians to help us by staffing a phone center to answer questions about COVID and connect people with the resources they need. Or the ambassadors that are at parks and along the Greenbelt talking with folks about social distancing. historically have performed the services of parking enforcement downtown, or animal enforcement up in the foothills. So as often as we've been able to, and for the most part, we've repurposed people to meet current needs because they're different than they would be on a day-by-day basis. Go ahead, Lana.
Thank you. Also, we saw several questions about compost pickup sites and glass recycling. Elizabeth from Central Bench asked, compost sites, glass recycling, hazardous waste recycling are all closed. By design, we don't tend to congregate when using these facilities. Truly, closure impinges. Why close? What am I not getting?
Sure. So we do not deem these to be essential services and have worked with Republic Services, who picks up and deals with our garbage and our recycling and even helps with the composting because they pick it up, to make sure that we're actually just doing the basics right now. And that is picking up compost materials from your driveway, recycling materials from your driveway, glass pickup from your driveway if you have it, and of course garbage. But those other centers that are out there, again, because of the touching of surfaces and the importance of keeping things clean and not exposing the public or our employees to the virus, all in an abundance of caution while we were trying to manage the curve, led us to believe that we needed to take these steps. And these are things that we continue to evaluate as we look at how we open, what we open first, what the rules around working at the sites will be, as well as dropping things off at the sites will be. We'll all go into the conversation we have about when these services start again.
Great. Another one is from Leanne in the north. It says she's north and east end, so I'll just say both. She asks, why are restaurant employees who are arm's length, not 6 feet from food preparation and packaging, not required to wear gloves and face masks to help prevent their asymptomatic coronavirus shedding to customers as they breathe and talk over their product? This has become highly concerning to me as I've been in line for takeout orders, standing 6 feet from other customers. Most of us are wearing masks while all restaurant employees are within close proximity to the food, packaging, and each other with no face masks or gloves. This concern equally applies to grocery store deli workers who prepare food while breathing, talking over the food, and also without protective measures, i.e. face masks.
Leanne, that's a great question, and I can't answer it completely. I don't know the full answer as to why some establishments are not doing this. It has been stated by CDC that it should be done. These are the conversations and actually the guidelines and rules that we need to come up with as we reopen. So you're right. When you go to a restaurant, I was at one last week and they had masks and gloves on. I was at one today and I had my mask on and they didn't. And as I came out of the building with my food, somebody hadn't given me the space and walked through the door at the same time as me. And it was somewhat surprising. So there, as often as possible, I find that people are trying to do the right thing as residents and giving people space, and businesses are taking the steps that they need to take, ought to take to protect their employees. It's not happening all the time. The Central District Health oversees restaurant inspections, health inspections, and at probably a week or maybe 2 weeks ago, there was in one of our calls with mayors and county commissioners from the Treasure Valley, we actually asked Central District Health about restaurant inspections and enforcement when it came to different social distancing rules. But at that time, the masks weren't a recommendation from CDC, whereas now they are. So if there's anything that we can do to get back to you, if there's more information regarding that, we'll be sure to do that. Lana will get your information, or if you don't mind sharing it. But otherwise, I'd say that I will tuck this away as something that as your office returns to work, as City Hall returns to work, we were just talking about today, we're going to have to come up with guidelines that employers are expected to enforce for not only social distancing within the establishment, but the rules around gloves and wearing a mask too.
Okay, we have one from Janelle in Northwest Boise. She says, a friend just this last weekend passed away, not from COVID-19, but from suicide. The events, including isolation and uncertainty, triggered old fears and despair. He was a wonderful friend with so many people, and our friend community is heartbroken for him and his spouse. What is being done to encourage those who are feeling emotionally burdened and frightened or overwhelmed to seek help? I've read some articles in the local paper calling attention to the increasing risk of domestic violence and child abuse to which sheltering in place potentially poses. As a mental health provider, I am still seeing my patients virtually, but also want to be able to be a resource for others. I'm concerned for those who are suffering emotionally from the pandemic. Is there some sort of public message that can be circulated to encourage folks to reach out? I'm certain a lot of therapists and providers are able to help.
Thank you so much for asking that question. And I'm so sorry about your friend, for you, but your friend's family as well, and all who knew him. This is a really tough time for so many. And you're right. We have deep concerns about the increase of domestic violence calls and incidents, the risks that sheltering in place poses to women and children who might be in unsafe situations, and also to men, frankly. And of course, to those who suffer from mental health, anxiety, depression, etc., that could be exacerbated by this. As it sounds like you're a counselor, you know well how important it is for people to reach out and talk. But as leaders in this region, I can say it's becoming a topic of conversation more and more often. Nationally, I've spoken with communities to learn what they're doing, and we have begun discussing whether or not there are simple steps that we could take through PSAs, et cetera, just to encourage people to reach out. And we will be launching a program through the city of Boise to try to create community online by offering different programming, but that is not nearly the same as that person-to-person connection that people in distress really need. My father-in-law actually volunteers at the hotline, for the suicide prevention hotline. And there's only so many people that can do that, but so many more people that likely need help at this time, because it is tough to be alone. So to the public out there, I would say, if you are feeling more anxious, if you're finding yourself more depressed, having that like jittery sense of unrest and angst, reach out to someone. And if you aren't feeling that way, but know that you have people in your life that have experienced anxiety or depression in the past, it's ever more important to reach out and see if they're willing to have a conversation. Just check in with them, including your employees, coworkers, colleagues, et cetera, because it's now been a month and it'll likely be a few more weeks, at least 2 more weeks. And these are very real concerns. And on domestic violence specifically, the Women and Children's Alliance right now is doing quite a bit to raise recognition of the issue. They're asking people to take different actions, to share their information through your social network, so that if somebody needs help, they might see it and otherwise wouldn't have. And of course, they're seeking donations to help them in this time when they are finding that there's going to be more need to rapidly rehouse people that need support when they call.
This one came in from a resident on the Central Bench. If Governor Little opens the state on May 1st and Mayor McLean thinks it's too soon, would she keep restrictions in place for Boise? What are the conditions under which Mayor McLean thinks the city will be able to reopen, even in phases? And if those conditions are met, then what can we expect for a phased reopening? Will there be maximum capacities in place of 10 or more? Will certain businesses still remain closed, etc.?
These are all the questions you asked are the elements of the planning that we're putting together right now. I said before the governor made his last order, which I fully supported, that I was prepared, as was the city council of Boise prepared, to pass a stay home, stay healthy order through the end of April for our city. And of course, hope that other cities in the region would do the same, because it's so important that we do it together if we really want to contain and manage the rate of spread. Moving forward, it's hard to say. I've taken to saying that we can't choose dates, the virus chooses dates. And it's hard to project 2 weeks from now the steps that we might take, whether it be continuing to keep things closed fully or opening some things with social distancing rules. But you're right, we have to determine what size groups are okay and when. We know that the 6 feet separation between people will continue to be important. I envision that as companies welcome their employees back to work, I know here at City Hall, we'll have to have a plan for masks, for physical distancing, for hand washing stations, and all those different pieces to keep people clean and as healthy as possible. I imagine that when we do restart the economy, it will be in stages, and we'll be looking to the businesses that can operate we'll be looking to businesses to show that they can operate in ways that will protect the health of their employees and prevent outbreaks. We've all sacrificed so much. The last thing we want to do is just quickly undo it all and then have exactly what we wanted to avoid happen, but 2 or 3 months later than it would have otherwise. So look for in the coming weeks plans from the city of Boise that explain how we will be reopening. And we will, as in the same way that we closed and move people to telework and develop policies so that people could work from home and take pandemic leave so that we could lead by example. We have the intention of doing the same thing as we reopen. But that in May, especially, while I can't say it'll be all or nothing, I can say that we'll have to continue to be thoughtful about the distance we have between people and how it is we go about work. And I mean, honestly, even today, there were announcements that other gatherings in Boise and Idaho in June and July had been postponed. And I expect that we'll see more organizations doing the same.
Thank you. Javier from Southwest Boise and a few others have asked about, asked questions relating to those protesting the orders. Specifically, Javier said, will the city of Boise prosecute or hold responsible the individuals who organized a protest at the state capitol and violated stay-at-home orders from the state and the city?
In advance of that protest, the city of Boise law enforcement coordinated with state of Idaho law enforcement, and state of Idaho law enforcement was the primary agency overseeing that while we were monitoring it. No arrests were made that day. So the quick answer is no, we won't be prosecuting them because they weren't arrested. I'll say this, every time people choose to gather in large groups like that, they are choosing to put others at risk. It is on each of us to think about the impact of our actions on other people. And if we want to get back to work, I know we all want to restart the economy and get back into community. We've got to move forward with the steps that we've asked the public to take because we know they work. We can see that they're working. And if we just hold out a little bit longer, we will be able to open slowly our community, the jobs that we all want to get back to, the establishments we love to visit, while keeping all of us safe.
So Amy from Southeast Boise asks, will summer recreation activities like mountain biking, camps be open? Also, what about the public swimming pools?
Amy, thanks for that question. There are so many parents out there wondering the same thing right now, as well as kids. My son's asking me the same. I do not know yet. The parks director is looking at all of the programs. And of course, we're looking at data every day, and we'll make the decision closer to the time that programs would start. As I said earlier, I can't remember who it was that asked. Wasn't Javier? Well, for the person on the bench that asked about reopening, the size of group will matter. And just as the schools have decided to stay remote because size of group matters, we'll be looking at the gathering size at locations and then determining whether or not they can open. And we'll be doing the same thing with classes. I'm sorry I can't answer with certainty right now. I know there are so many people out there that want to have these opportunities back in the summer, but we're going to just have to take it week by week.
Similarly, Cheryl from North End is asking, what are your thoughts on infection contact tracing as a way to open up Boise for business?
Sure. Contact tracing is a tried and true public health protection technique. Just this morning, a group of us once again asked Central District Health. They oversee contact tracing. They oversee public health matters and would oversee contact tracing. We asked them what their plans were, what plans were in place, and there are local communities that want to be helpful in terms of repurposing employees, if possible, if legally possible, to help trace. Nationally, public health experts are saying you have to have effective trace programs in effect to get us back to work sustainably. And the hospitals here in Idaho are saying the same thing. It is my hope that we see a statewide coordinated program that oversees tracing. And at the very least, that Central District Health that oversees Ada County, and then the health district that oversees Canyon County will be ready with a program for May so that we can start to bump up the numbers of tracing calls that can be made to make it possible to get more people back to work.
Thank you. And before we move into the next few questions, I just want to remind the participants that you can submit your questions in YouTube chat. So please continue to do that. There's some really great questions coming in. With that, Mayor,
I wish I could see these questions.
There's some really, really good ones. So Gay from Northwest Boise is asking, what is being done to improve testing for COVID-19 and getting results in a timely manner? Without testing and follow-up with exposure, we cannot possibly begin to open back up our city and reduce the need for separation.
Sure, that's a great question. The healthcare system, so the hospitals are working on testing. Crush the Curve is a group of employers, and Seltzer Medical Group that are working on testing. I'd encourage anyone out there that believes that they have symptoms to call their doctor and head out to one of the testing centers if their doctor says so. There's more testing available now because there's less of a demand for tests. So, or I should say there are more tests available right now because there's less of a demand for tests. So anyone that isn't feeling well should head out for a test, or I guess I should say, should first talk with their doctor or healthcare professional about being tested. But don't not call because you're worried that tests aren't available.
Okay, and Dave from downtown Boise is asking, I would like to know of what the mayor would tell people if they are afraid to go to a homeless shelter at night because of the coronavirus. My wife has a compromised immune system and her doctor has said repeatedly not to go to a homeless shelter because of her medical issues.
So I would have first always urge people to listen to their doctors. I'm not going to give someone advice that's counter to what a doctor has said to you. But I would like everyone to know, especially those who are experiencing homelessness right now, that the shelters and the city of Boise and healthcare professionals and other service organizations are working closely to make sure that the plans are in place to protect those who are staying in shelters. And if you are unhoused and not heading into a shelter in the evening, please check in with Interfaith or with Boise Rescue Mission because there are beds available. And there are other options as well for those who have health problems that make it unsafe to be in a homeless shelter at this time. The city has worked with the county and all of the service providers to make sure that we have options for those who are experiencing homelessness who should not be in the shelter at this time. And that we also have options to isolate and quarantine those who have been exposed or who have the virus outside, that happen to be staying in a shelter outside of a shelter, if and when that becomes necessary.
Nissa is asking, Boise is a cultural mecca. How do we as a community ensure the people who create culture in Boise are here to perform and the venues they perform in continue to exist when we get back to normal? Writers, artists, actors, and musicians are primarily self-employed. Most require an audience and a venue space where people congregate to earn a living. Unemployment and payroll protection programs are supposedly extended to self-employed and independent contractors, but I know of none who have successfully accessed those funds. Artists and such are so important to a community for synthesizing times like this, putting them into words, bringing meaning to that which can't be put into words, and putting them into context now and in the future. It seems events of any significant size will not be coming until the end of summer at the soonest. How does our artist community and the venues survive this?
That's a great question, and you put it well into words. Just this morning, I was talking with the director of the Shakespeare Festival about their plans and they're a more established arts organization, but like every arts organization that does, as you said, rely on people coming to listen, watch, participate, that's not possible right now. And so organizations and individuals are having to put contingency plans into place. On our website, cityofboise.org/COVID-19, we have a link to our Arts and History Department where there are resources, I believe, there are resources listed there. And there's a group of artists working with the Arts and History Department to develop a fund that would be administered like a grant fund to help support artists in this time of need. Very similar, in fact, to the COVID relief fund that the United Way, the Community Foundation of Idaho, and the Nonprofit Center have put together. So if you were an artist, a writer, well, you're all artists. First, I say thank you for choosing Boise as the place in which you live and the environment in which you make your art, because we are all the better for it. And it is so important that we do everything that we can to support you and to support others so that when the time comes that we can be back together in community, we can celebrate this community through the arts. So I think it was Nisa that asked the question, and please check out that website and share the information with the people that you know that are artists that are impacted by this. Send it far and wide. And if you have any other suggestions, we'd love to hear it. Thank you.
David is asking, are you hoping for a vaccine?
I think we're all hoping for a vaccine, David. But everybody says it could be 18 months to 2 years, maybe 12 months to 18 months before the vaccine is a reality. But yes, people are working hard on it. And in the meantime, there are steps that we can take to get back to work, to come back together as community. And of course, that entails testing and tracing, and then new ways of being safe, such as masks and gloves and washing our hands much, much more often than we used to.
This next question is from Gary in Southeast Boise. Gary says, given falling city revenues and increasing needs among Boise residents due to COVID-19, what adjustments to the transition reports do you anticipate? Or do you? By the way, what I've seen so far looks really great. Congrats to all who participated.
Thanks. And yes, big thanks to I think it was 71 citizens, if I remember my number correctly, that participated in those 6 committees. Those reports, as you rightly pointed out, were written before COVID came to Boise. However, many of the topics that they discuss and the ideas that they put forward, I believe, are key to our long-term recovery and resilience. So while we can't do it all because of the budget implications of that, and you're right, we're going to have some tough calls to make here at the City of Boise when it comes to our budget for the next year, and we're going to start that conversation tomorrow at City Council. But we're looking at the budget implications of many of the proposals in the transition reports. Of course, I've been asked to prioritize what I want to accomplish in the first year and then in the 4. And so much of that will be to ensure that we are a resilient community with opportunity for everyone. That was my goal before this crisis, and it remains my goal. And in many ways, it's my north point when I think about what we have to do right now to respond, what we need to do right now to prepare to recover, and ultimately who we need to bring together and how, and what policies we need to pass, and what investments we need to make to ensure that we come out of this stronger than we were before.
We just received a question from Nicole. I believe it's a follow-up to Nissa's. Nicole is asking, are there technologies the city could make available for the use by artists who are struggling to reach their audiences, i.e. video streaming services, payment resources, etc.?
Oh, that's a great question. And I'm not sure if I don't know of technologies myself, but I'd be more than happy to put that in front of the Arts and History Department. It's my hope, I mentioned in an earlier question about mental health, that as we launch a program to connect Boiseans online and create community online, it's my hope there'll be opportunities through that for artists to participate. But you probably know better than I do what other support mechanisms would be helpful. And I'd be more than happy to ask Lana to forward your question, as well as any other specifics that you have, to Arts and History for them to mull it over, because they probably have more information to share.
Nicholas in Northwest Boise says, how would the mayor respond to some of our residents' closed-minded views on people moving from California to Boise? In particular, the bumper stickers that say Idaho is full or California communists not welcome. I know it's hard for the mayor to change racist closed-minded views, in particular views that are instilled at a young age. It's almost like many long-term residents could benefit from civics lessons on how government works, as well as basic rules of civility.
Well, Nicholas, that's a question that often came up during the course of the campaign. And one thing that I always did at listening sessions, if and when it came up, was I asked people to raise their hands if they were born in Boise. And the reality is that so many of us were not. And those of us that were lucky enough to be here from the beginning. But all of us are here because we found this community, whether because it was given to us, without question, because it's all we knew, whether we left and recognized what we'd had and wanted to come back, which is many people, or whether or not we found it at some other point in our life and recognize the magic of this place. This community is for everyone. It is my goal to ensure that the policies we pass are a community for everyone. And I moved here in 1998, so 22 years ago. And many of the same issues then, because of growth around people coming from the outside, the same messages, et cetera, I saw then, and we didn't see them for a while because our community stopped growing as rapidly, and now we're seeing them again. And it's on each of us to recognize and to mirror through our actions that if you were here, when you were here, however you found this place, Boise is your home. Boise is a city for everyone. And everything that I can do with the incredible team here at the City of Boise is focused on ensuring that this community is a place for everyone. And I'd urge anyone in this community, we all love it. We love it for different reasons, but a big piece of it is because we love the people we live near. We love the place in which this community sits. And those two things are shared by all. And from that common ground and that common care, I believe we can build a richer community that's all the better for the diverse viewpoints and diverse perspectives and the appreciation that often comes from someone that wasn't here forever and brings to our community.
Thank you. Heather would like to know what steps are being made for increased commercial real estate bailouts and aid for restaurants and bars.
Sure. The city knows, I know, that there are concerns about among those who are in the real estate profession, the commercial real estate profession, the restaurant profession, the impact of this crisis. The first federal bailout had loans that people could apply for, and that money went so quickly. And now they're looking at doing it again so that more people can apply for loans, that many parts of the loans were forgiven if they were used for payroll and other costs that your business would have on a regular basis. The state is also going to be receiving federal funds to support local governments in the losses that we've had. But as you rightly say, every business that's struggling is actually made up of a whole bunch of people that are struggling as a result. And I have committed to continue to advocate at the state level and the federal level with our delegation and beyond to ensure that those dollars can be opened up again to help people in this community and around the state that need that support.
Okay, we have one more from Carrie in the North End. What are the rules when it comes to e-bikes and the Greenbelt? Shouldn't these be considered motorized transportation and banned? I run, walk, and cycle on the Greenbelt and have seen an increased number of these bikes. Last year, I was involved in an accident on the Greenbelt because someone on the e-bike was going too fast. I had to slam on my brakes to avoid hitting them. And I crashed and the person on the e-bike just kept going. I had to have major surgery on my shoulder, which was broke, with a torn labrum and rotator cuff. This year, there seems to be many e-bikes and I feel it's very unsafe. E-bikes should be on the roads as well as electric scooters. I hope you will consider my input and help make our Greenbelt safer.
Thanks for your input, Carrie. Really appreciate it. Right now, by code, both e-scooters and e-bikes are allowed on the Greenbelt, and they're also allowed on sidewalks because we don't have a complete bike network around the community. There are supposed to be speed limits that people follow, and had that person stopped, that person actually would have been held responsible for the accident. I'm sorry that that didn't happen. I imagine right now, with the number of people on the Greenbelt, there are probably more safety concerns even than there typically are. And so appreciate having this flagged, because I want to check in with the Parks Department about what we're doing in terms of monitoring and enforcement of speeds down on the Greenbelt. But we decided, I think it was probably maybe 2.5 years ago, we had a hearing on permitting of e-bikes and where they would go. And at that point I was on the council, and we did decide to allow them to be on the Greenbelt. Of course, part of that is that they're supposed to not go faster than, I think, is it 20 miles per hour? I'm not sure about that. I can get you that. But also that they're supposed to ride accordingly. Just as, like I say to my son, you can't go fast if you're surrounded by people on his non-e-bike. So you're supposed to ride well, and there is a speed limit that came with those rules. And because we wanted to ensure that people that had an e-bike to get further, that were coming, say, from Harris Ranch or from Eagle and Community into Boise, but on the Greenbelt, could still do that because it's a passageway for many people, but it needs to be done in safe and responsible ways.
Thank you. This one is from Jeremiah in Southeast Boise. In light of the COVID-19 pandemic threat and economic uncertainty, could the city of Boise waive the high prepayment penalties, 24% of appraised value for refinance or realized profit from sale, imposed by the Housing and Community Development on homeowners who utilize the HCD's down payment assistance program? As some may wish to refinance or sell their property, but these fees make such a decision cost prohibitive.
I think that was Jeremiah. I do not know the answer to that question. There's very little that we can do when it comes to changing financial and tax law. However, I will, if you will, I guess Lana has the question now. If you'll leave your contact information with her, Lana will ask our housing department to get you an accurate answer. And if not us, which I believe it's not, where you would go to ask that question.
Thank you. So Nicholas is asking, has the city of Boise looked at possible revenue generated by the legalization of cannabis in any form? The funds could be dedicated to building a new library in Boise.
The funds could be dedicated to many things. And to legalize cannabis or marijuana, the state needs to take action here. And there was that ballot measure that was being worked on that people had hoped to have on the ballot this year in 2020. It didn't happen. I imagine they'll pick it up again. During the campaign, I said often, as did all the candidates, that legalized marijuana does just what you said. It decriminalizes drug use, but two, it creates revenue streams for the state and the city. I signed that petition that would have put the question on the ballot because I think it's a valid question and would support the legalization of marijuana.
Thank you. So Heather is asking, do you feel the leniency we have seen in Boise compared to other states in regards to enforced masks and public spaces will change after the behavior we have seen this past weekend? As a Boise citizen, I was proud that we were able to keep the freedom to use the Greenbelt trails in the foothills and the like, but now I fear our community respect that freedom and it needs to be reconsidered. Few people ruining it for the rest of us, but surviving this is more important.
So a couple things on that. I share your belief that it's really important that we keep our parks and open spaces and Greenbelt open because, as was rightly pointed out earlier in the town hall, mental health is an important component of the stay home situation that we're in. And we have to think about the safety of being around other people and being outside, as well as the safety and mental health needs that people have to stay healthy. And we've taken steps to close things with that in mind, because we've also purposely left things open, like the Greenbelt and the trails and the flat green spaces of the parks, to give people a place to go to get outside. This last weekend, I was out on both days and I ran with a mask both days. Masks are not required in this state. They're encouraged by the CDC. So right now we are not enforcing masks because it's not required. But we have sent more ambassadors, we're calling them, enforcement officers, out to the Greenbelt, into the trails, into the parks, just to talk with people, to remind them of the distancing. And you're right, it's just a few people really that aren't following the rules that do exist or the guidelines that aren't yet rules. And I continue to urge people to think about the impact of not having these spaces and then to behave accordingly to keep themselves and others safe. My experience on the trails this weekend were that they were busy, but for the most part, everybody was trying to do the right thing, even walking off the side, perpendicular to the trail, creating 6 feet, going single file if they were walking in groups as they approached me. And we need to continue to do that. And we'll continue to do our best to educate folks. We don't have to get to the point where we're closing them. And I should say too, just before Lana jumps back in, we are looking at data, and we can see that the steps we took early, the steps that the governor took to ask us to stay home, are working. The number of cases, looks like this right now. Fewer people are coming in asking for tests. We need to do this a little bit longer. And we've all got spring fever. It's beautiful out. We need to be outside because we're cooped up inside, and we can see from mobility data that more people are going to parks. But we can also see from mobility data that so many people, fewer people are driving and going to places where people gather. It's just that our parks now have an increase in use. So it's so important that when you're out there, that you create space around you and between you and others so that we can keep having access to the parks, trails, and Greenbelt.
And Robert on the West Bench actually has a question along the same lines. He is asking, when may everyone, especially people with autoimmune diseases, bathroom issues, might it be possible to start having more clean, open restrooms on our public trail system, Greenbelt system, and all city-owned parks? We as a community really depend on them being open, clean for use with toilet paper and proper way to wash your hands or have the proper sanitizer to use on a daily basis. Last summer, twice as many of the automatic bathrooms didn't open. It wasn't too early or too late, just one. Talking to others in the Boise community, it's been a problem, especially in older parks and trailheads that aren't being replenished with toilet paper or sanitizer on a daily basis. It's very important to have the ability of the use without having to stress if they're open or ready for use or cleaned properly. It seems it's not a priority for the park service leader of our city. Thanks for letting me express my concern as everyone uses a restroom. I hope to be able to use all public areas during our warmer days to get in a safe walk, hike, or bike in our beautiful public trail systems and not have to worry.
Thanks for that feedback. I will for sure send that on to Parks Department as well. I don't know typically what the timing of opening our restrooms is because I know that they're closed in the winter, and this year springs it seemed came sooner, and then many more of us wanted to be out. But it could well be that you're finding that the timing's the same. Clean bathrooms and appropriate sanitizing in this time of COVID was indeed a concern. And we knew that we could not be in the bathroom every time right after someone used it to be able to clean and sterilize as it should be. And so we've had to make decisions not to have some of those open, just in the same way that we've made decisions not to have some of our facilities opened. But to the importance of having them available throughout the summer, when and if it becomes safe to open them fully, you can be assured that we've opened them because we know that we can also clean them the way they need to be cleaned to protect all of the users and to prevent virus from spreading.
Thank you. Casey is asking, what is the city's role in future development projects, like the proposed project on Main and Whitewater, to make sure developments include more affordable housing units?
So the city's role in future development and in ensuring we have affordable housing included in them is that of negotiator. And I believe that there are policies that we can put in place that make it clear that in exchange for things that developers would like, we would like to see affordable housing included in multifamily projects, for example. So you'll see in my transition reports, and I've been working with city staff on a number of policies. The land trust is important for affordable housing throughout the city. Having affordable housing overlay zones or ways that we can negotiate affordable housing into multifamily projects, very important. And looking for ways to fast track or make it easier for projects, small scale projects, even accessory dwelling units that would be rented at affordable rates to be done. So all those things we're looking at, we have an important role as the city in increasing the amount of affordable housing with tools that some that we've used, some that we haven't, but we're intending to try.
Great, thank you. This one came in from Brandy on the West Bench. Since you've supported Governor Little's extension of the stay-home order, which forces thousands in Boise to live on a maximum of $400 a week in unemployment, will you yourself commit to donating your salary to charity or live on unemployment?
I did support the governor's order, and I know that that has economic implications to many people. I am working full-time, and like every family is having to think about our own economic impact of this crisis. But at this point, I will say that we are doing everything as a city that we can to support our residents, and that requires hard work on the part of all of our city employees, my team, myself included, to try to address this. We're working with the governor's office and with other elected officials to come up with economic solutions. and we'll be partnering with businesses on a recovery plan. All of those things are going to be key to getting our community back to work. And it's an assurance I give everyone that it'll be and is most of my focus at this point to make sure that our residents are cared for, that we can recover this economy, and we can have opportunity for everyone moving forward. I'm also working and talking with the delegation to make sure, as I said earlier, that people have opportunity to recover some of what they've lost. We need to see more and more rapid response to unemployment at the state level, but importantly at the federal level, because that's where so many more resources are. So on that, we have 4 minutes left. It's 4 to 5. I just am going to close with a couple things. And that is that I really appreciate that all of you joined me today for this first one. It's weird to not see the faces of people asking me questions because I really love that. And have gotten used to that in this listening session, the listening sessions that I do. We're going to continue to do this regularly. We might experiment with some other formats. And then as soon as we can gather in groups again, we'll be doing them in person. This has been an incredibly trying time for people throughout this community. It's a trying time for those, especially who have lost their jobs, especially for those who have family members that are at extreme risk if they get COVID. And then, of course, those who have had family members, friends, loved ones themselves that have contracted the virus have been incredibly ill in hospitals, and some who haven't made it. All of this hardship that we're experiencing right now is like none we have ever experienced. And it calls on each of us to give so much more than we imagined we could possibly give, whether it be caring for someone who's ill, trying to figure out how to pay bills, juggling kids at home while you're trying to work if you've been able to keep your job and move it remotely. And all the while, I'm worrying about what's next. There's no easy answer to so many of these questions that were asked today. There's no easy decision that's made on whether to close or open and when and how, because no matter what we do, we impact someone. But I can assure you that while we have made really tough decisions that I know have impacted many people in our community, family, friends, and neighbors, we are thinking constantly about the steps that we can take to continue to provide you with services that you need, the steps that we can take that might in some way alleviate the hardship that some of you are experiencing, and the steps that we can and must take to partner with people throughout this community to come up with a plan that we implement to recover as quickly as possible. So throughout all this time, as we're working on all these pieces and we're all have to be separated, which is not the way any of us like to live, know that we're thinking about how we react, how we plan, how we react, and ultimately how we recover. We're seeking partnerships. If you have suggestions on how we can support those in the community that have different needs, if you have something that you would like to share, an idea that you'd like to work on, please reach out to our office. Because when we can ultimately come back together and work on these issues together, we're going to need all of us. But I also know that we will do it well because all of you have been so willing to partner and ultimately to sacrifice to ensure that the health and safety of those in our community comes first. And for that, I will always be grateful, and as always, am incredibly inspired by you, motivated by each of you, but cannot wait till we can get back together face to face, have tough conversations, and then work together on what's next. So take care, all of you. Be well. I appreciate that you joined my first listening session via Zoom and look forward to more. Bye-bye.